Welcome to the Produce Reporter Week in Review, except it's not a review, it's a prediction of 2026 trends that we think we'll see. I'm joined by Pamela Riemenschneider, retail expert and presenter and analyst at conferences now. I think we're going to see some big trends in three topics. And what I'm thinking is online grocery, mergers and acquisitions, and fraud.
And we had so much to talk about that this is actually part one of two. We're going to
Yeah.
talk about my food trend predictions in a later video, and we're going to look the same with my cat running around and everything. But we had so much to talk about, we had to break it up. But I want to hear what you have to say about especially fraud and online grocery. But we're going to kick it off with mergers and acquisitions. What's going on with M&A this year, and how do you think that's going to affect what's going to happen in 2026?
We saw a lot of them in 2025, and my prediction is it is not going to slow down, it is going to speed up. And I don't think we're going to see the Kroger Albertsons types or like US Foods and Performance Food Group had talked merger. They called it off in 2025. Huge companies. I don't think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see a lot more acquisitions of the type that we've seen with like Grubmark and Fresh Edge acquiring companies that already know what they're doing and show value and supply chain efficiency. And I think there's a lot of companies that are owned by boomer generation people, and the succession plans are not as easy as it seems. And it's just easier to sell to private equity or bigger companies in that space. And I expect that we're going to see more of that. I think we're going to see not the biggest getting bigger, but like the next tier down getting bigger, acquiring competitors, expanding markets with acquisitions. We saw a lot of that in 25. So that's my prediction. I don't think it'll slow down. I think it will speed up.
I definitely think you're right on that one. And I think you bring up an interesting point about the boomer generation of people looking at their succession plan. And we've talked about this for years about what is your succession plan for your company. And a lot of them are didn't have a really clear one in mind, and in comes private equity, and that's where we go with that. So I think we're going to see a whole lot more of that.
We also have a
Because
societal issue with Gen X and millennials not having the kind of wealth that the boomer generation has acquired. And so they're not able to buy. You would like
yeah,
to think every 30 years or so, the next generation can afford to take over a company, but we just haven't seen that. And it doesn't have anything to do with produce, it has to do with bigger societal issues, but that's going to affect all the businesses. And
yeah.
and the way we're going to see that in produce and possibly retail, because we did see a lot of acquisitions of smaller retail chains by bigger retail chains. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And then another trend as far as retail goes, when companies are acquiring smaller regional companies, they're not changing them. They're keeping them under their local brands. And so I think we're going to see a lot of that because consumers don't really see so much the results of that. Like Schnucks did that with a chain in Wisconsin where it's like 20 stores. They're keeping them all under the original brands. So I don't think consumers will see as much changes, but those of us who follow the industry, I think we're going to see more of that in 26.
Yeah, it may not be the consumer facing changes, but it will be the sourcing and business part of it, the back end business part of it, I think is more important to the produce industry. When a chain consolidates, that means its buying office consolidates as well. So that's the difference that we're going to see. And maybe for the consumers, they might see some efficiencies. But from the sell side, it's going to be a little more challenging, or maybe a little easier because you already had a relationship with the buyer, and so that makes it a little easier for you. But it is definitely going to make it a more competitive market from the buy side.
And this is a sad one, and I don't like it, but I think we're going to see more of it, and that is fraud.
Oh, yeah.
Because we've seen a massive increase in 25 in fraud, specifically to the produce industry, spoofing, scammers. I think it's I think it's led by a couple reasons. One, the technology is getting so that the scammers are so much more easily able to fool companies. And it's just it's hard to figure out when you're dealing with real people. Uh, Blue Book has taken this very seriously. We've way increased our stories on fraud. We've explained what's been happening so that our readers can see, oh, this is happening to them. This is what it looks like. Blue Book was involved with a group creating a guide, fraud prevention in produce, that's out there to help companies. And I think it also gets to a bigger societal issue where we're seeing fraud in many areas, especially like big areas like government, and people are starting to get a lot more sensitive to, am I getting screwed?
Right. And some of it isn't even fraud. Some of it's things like shrinkflation. But
Some of it is shrinkflation, and that is not fraud. That they are clearly labeled. They're not pointing out when they're raising prices and dropping sizes and items like we talked about with Thanksgiving and Christmas meal deals.
right.
Prices went down, but they're not telling you it's 18 items instead of 25. You can
That's
get away with that to a certain degree, but you companies have to be really careful because if consumers start to perceive they're getting screwed, the backlash is huge. Like we saw with Instacart. Um, you said you watched like a massively long video online.
10
I can't
minutes on
believe
TikTok
10
about
minutes. Who sits still and watches a 10-minute video on
somebody who
TikTok?
took their Adderall.
No kidding.
So, but when we talk about this, the fine line between what consumer like fraud is crime, right? But that middle area where consumers are like, this isn't fraud, but this feels fishy. This is a scam. That causes backlash. And that backlash, I think people have to be very sensitive to. Because I don't want to feel like I'm getting scammed when I'm buying my groceries online. When we talk about dynamic pricing, we're like, they'll never do that in store. And then you find out that Instacart's been doing it on the sly with all these different retailers, charging all these different prices just to see how much you're willing to pay. That is
I
so scammy. That is
That
so
is super
scammy.
scammy.
People
Yes,
are
that is.
like, that feels illegal. And it should be
Yeah.
illegal, maybe.
And when it comes to fraud, I think one of the biggest problems that we're having societally is when we see fraud happening and it being exposed, we want to see the people causing it be punished and make them stop doing it because that will discourage it. And part of the biggest thing that Americans are getting frustrated with is we're not seeing enough of that. Like we saw at the beginning of the year when the Doge thing was going on about all the government waste and fraud. Then we expected to see all these things stop and change and maybe people be held accountable. And we didn't see any of that. And now we have, I mean, in the produce industry, we have all this fraud and we just don't see enough of these people getting caught. They get away with things. They
There's
dogs.
no teeth. There's no teeth to any of
Yeah.
this stuff, right? There's no
Right.
teeth to PACA.
How
Um,
right. I mean, how are you going to, it's not going to stop if the people who are doing it aren't punished and stop doing it. And so I think that's why we're at risk of seeing rising fraud in 2026.
yeah, I think we are, and I think consumers and the people in general, like you mentioned, Doge is like, does Doge feel like a scam because nothing happened to the people that actually committed these alleged frauds? Because there was no wrapping it up and like punishing people. Because if fraud is a crime, who's going to jail? And we
Yeah.
just
What
no,
what
nothing
what
happened.
happens now? And nothing.
Nothing happened. No teeth. There's no teeth
Yeah.
to any of this stuff when we talk about having any accountability for fraud. And so anytime that consumers feel like they are getting scammed on something like this, it's going to make them leery of doing things like shopping online. Like it makes them feel like their retailer is scamming them because are they changing the prices because it's just me? And there's a lot of technologies. I talk about this in my speaking thing when I talk about innovation in retail, and I show some things that they can do where they can offer, based on geofencing, an old concept, but is actually feasible now. Because back in the day when they first introduced it, it was just like too far out there. It was kind of like QR codes. QR codes were too far out there because you had to have a special app Nobody's using them. And now the pandemic trained us to be able to, like most of us, I mean, my in-laws still can't figure out how to buy tickets at a basketball game using a QR code. They just can't. And so there's a certain population of folks that are never going to adapt to it, but the majority of us know how to use that stuff and know how to look up a recipe using a QR code in a grocery store, or they know how to look it up in menu, even though you hate doing it, you know how to do it.
Yeah.
Now geofencing in a grocery store, you can be walking through a grocery store and it knows who you are based on you opting in on your phone, and it can say, hey, psst, we'll give you 10% off of this if you buy it now. Um, People see that and they go, well, maybe they increase the price 10% because I'm who I am and I spend more on my groceries. And if they catch wind of somebody doing that, they know now that you can do it online, but are you going to do it in store too? I mean, and it just makes people so cautious and so angry about
Yes.
being scammed about that stuff.
People hate getting taken advantage of, especially people who are working hard and playing by the rules, and then seeing other people who aren't and getting away with it. That is very un-American, and that's a big problem.
Right? Yeah. And it kind of goes into our last topic for our what happened in 2025 and how is that going to push into 2026? And that's online grocery. And online grocery, who would have thought we'd still be keeping pace? As broke as everyone is, right? Everyone talks about how little they have to spend, but how are we all spending it online for groceries?
Well, not keeping pace, according to Brick Meets Clicks November analysis, 29% increase online grocery sales year over year. So it's not it's well more than keeping pace, but I wrote a column for Blueprints talking about how 2025 really changed the mindset. And I hopefully you saw that and agreed with some of those points. And uh, the big thing that I saw when you look at the big retailers, Walmart, who invested heavily in e-commerce, and it seems like they feel like they invested properly, and so they're increasing it. And then we have Kroger, who invested heavily in a spoke model with Ocado and closed fulfillment centers, and they shut it down. They said,
Right.
nope, no more of that. We invested, we thought we were on the right track, we're not on the right track, and now they're dealing with third-party delivery providers, and not just one, they have deals with Instacart, DoorDash, and Uber Eats. Like they are broad on how they're delivering to their customers.
Yeah. Like, but also when we think about it, there are all these different services and all these different opportunities for consumers, and it's all supported by, people seeing value in not having to go to the store. And you mentioned in your column that some other organizations are saying, yeah, but let's actually emphasize when we talk about all this online grocery is the importance of the physical store, and how we can get people to continue to go to the physical store by what value they're getting by making the effort themselves.
Yes, I talked about a survey that talked about uh, the profitability of in-store is still so much higher than e-commerce. And so while grocers still have to make that available to customers, that is not where they're going to see their big growth. I mean, they will see sales growth, but they're not seeing bottom line growth. And that still is in store. And as far as the produce industry goes, that's still a huge opportunity for produce because for generations, we've gotten incremental purchases just by the value of deals and the way produce looks. And that's something that the data is showing is true. We all had an inkling that that would happen when it got to online. And it is true. Online people are not shopping around, especially in the produce department, like they do in store. And so that's still something that retailers still have to offer to consumers, and it pays off.
Yeah, yeah. As long as consumers are seeing the value in what they're doing, somebody's going to win. You mentioned that Kroger invested heavily and kind of fizzled out on some of that stuff. I think part of that is they were sending in scouts on markets that they were planning to enter if they were able to buy Albertsons, like my market, for example. or Safeway. They sent in the scouts. There were Kroger trucks all over my neighborhood, but we don't have a Kroger anywhere near us. The closest one is Houston and Dallas. And they were planning on taking over that Randall's space and being able to just step right in on that stuff. So I think some of that is related to pulling back on that, but also some of it is related to retailers have figured out that the in-store model works okay, like fulfillment from in-store. You don't have to have a big warehouse. You don't have to have the big spend on the fancy equipment, the fancy technology. That doesn't mean they're not spending on technology. There's plenty of retailers that are spending on technology, like Walmart. Walmart's
Yeah.
another one that is their e-commerce is pretty sophisticated compared to a lot of other retailers out there. I think Amazon's the only one who even comes close to what Walmart is doing as far as investment in tech and online grocery fulfillment. And Amazon is kind of the elephant in the room because I don't know, you don't have Amazon Prime, right? You don't order all your stuff from Amazon.
Oh, I have Gen Z people here, so
Oh,
we've been
okay.
Prime members for pretty much their whole lifetime. So yes, although I'm not ordering my groceries that way, even though I know it is an option.
But when I go to the checkout, when I order stuff from Amazon, almost every time, and I ordered plenty of my Christmas stuff from Amazon, they are pushing same day groceries on me every time I'm checking out on Amazon. They're talking about what are the we had a story um a couple weeks ago about the top 10 best sellers for same day delivery on Amazon. It's bananas, avocados, strawberries, honey crisp apples, not just apples, premium apples, limes, blueberries, blackberries, organic bananas, navel oranges, and toilet paper.
Yeah, so 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10 are produce, and 9 out of 10 of those aren't just your average potatoes, onions, and Roma tomatoes. Those are I mean, organic bananas, blackberries. Really?
Yeah, there
Like,
was a time when we thought I would never trust anyone to pick these, and we've
mm-hmm.
clearly gotten over that.
Yeah. We've clearly either that or everyone's up ordering it at one time and then never ordering it again enough to continue to prop up their numbers. And I don't think that's possible.
I do not think
Um,
that's it.
Here we are. We got 9 out of 10, and the 10th one is toilet paper.
Yeah.
That I think those are really interesting numbers when you look at it. And I think it says something about what people are willing to do and the way that they're pushing it on all of their purchases. So many people are Amazon Prime shoppers. And when they're pushing produce at every checkout for someone like me, I've never ordered produce from Amazon. Like I go to Whole Foods in store and check my, scan my Prime thing for my discounts, but I've never ordered produce from Amazon. They're sure trying to get me to do it.
I suspect you will.
One of these days they'll get me. It's like the Borg. It's resistance is futile. They are
Oh,
they already know everything about me based on what I
you're an
order.
early adopter. You're going to do it before I do.
I have no privacy from Amazon. They know me. They know what I order. Like I might as well do one of those 23andMe's. I have no secrecy anymore.
Oh, do you have any predictions on online for 26?
The predictions for online in 2026. I think we're going to see more BOPIS, buy online, pick up in store. I've seen a lot of gig content, like people who are Instacart shoppers, Door Dashers. We're seeing a lot of that gig economy. There are a lot of people available to be gig workers, so that keeps the cost down because there's such a huge pool of labor available to do it.
That's
Um,
one of the things that you talked about before, and I totally agree with it. And I think we are going to see a lot more of that in 26. It's not only the unemployment rate, people who are unemployed being able to do gig work. It's people who are employed who are doing second jobs. It's like
mhm,
almost everyone you know has some side hustle of pretty much anyone, Gen X, millennials, and well, most Gen Zs aren't supporting themselves yet, but at the beginning are.
mhm.
There's so much of that. So there is so much labor.
Yeah.
Walmart's CEO talked about AI changing every job, and that might be the case, but actual physical people doing stuff is not going away. And that's, I think, the Kroger switching directions to all these third parties, I think, is evidence of that. the people are out there and they do a good job at it, and it doesn't cost that much.
Right, right. As long as you're not a dude picking for Instacart, apparently, because that is still the butt of the joke on social media is male Instacart shoppers substituting nonsensical things for, whatever. I implore you as a produce professional to go look it up because these guys are giving men a bad name.
That seems like a gross stereotype to me.
I would trust you to shop for my groceries, but I wouldn't trust some rando from Instacart.
Well, I am an expert, so
All right. Well, that's it for part one of this year's 2026 predictions from the Produce Reporter Week in Review. It's a pleasure to join you. We'll see us again in a couple of weeks.
2026, more of this, more lots of good stuff. Join us.